Now we switch to Jason Carpenter's recollections. He writes, I remember the questions I had regarding the rotation system. First, would everyone be forced to rotate even if they didn't want to? I mean, some people might want to continue doing the same thing for many years just because they enjoy it. Second, certain positions would probably require a certain degree of specialization or specialized training and or a certain aptitude. Not just anyone would be able to step in and be proficient at everything within a few weeks. Some things might require years of training. Third, how often would this rotation take place? Fourth, would there be any choice involved, or would workers be assigned to positions and fields according to need? Someone suggested, I think it was Katie, that maybe we should begin by just brainstorming what the aspects would be of the most ideal rotation system and then break it down from there, seeing where it takes us. Tom said, first and foremost, it has to be balanced so that an adequate number of workers are available in each segment to meet the needs of that segment. Katie then added, and we should try to incorporate a way for workers to voice their preferences for those things that most interest them and to be assigned to them as often as possible. There should be some sort of system of seniority so that the longer you've been in the workforce, the greater preference you enjoy in terms of your choices. Jordan then cautioned, yeah, but most likely there are going to be certain jobs that are going to be far less desirable than others. To which Katie replied, well, you can still make it fair and balanced. Those coming into the workforce will be required to put in a certain amount of time in those positions. Just make it fair. Make it so everyone has to do it. If you do, then no one will have to do it for very long and the task will always get done. Then Roger said, maybe there should be some added incentive, such as if you volunteer to do one of these positions for a while, then the time you put in counts a little bit more toward fulfilling your 20-year workforce requirement and or gives you some sort of edge in the seniority rankings. That way, you'll get volunteers, and those who really want to skip that particular job will have the freedom to do so without hampering the workforce's ability in those areas. Most heads nodded their approval of that. Then Sarah said, there should be a set amount of time you need to be at your current assignment before you can rotate out of it, but I'm not sure what that should be. It might vary according to the position. It could be as short as, say, 6 months or possibly as long as 2 years, something like that, and you could always request to stay for another round if you liked it. It was Jordan who brought up the inevitable question. What about professions like doctors, lawyers, law enforcement agents, biologists, physicists, engineers? I mean, those aren't things you can just rotate in and out of every year or two, like a postal worker or an assembly line worker, or those other basically unskilled positions. And where do trades and crafts come into play? There's some sort of formal training involved with these as well. Maybe not as much as being a surgeon, but there seems to be different degrees of training and education involved for a variety of different skilled services that, let's face it, are going to be needed in a society. I mean, do you want a doctor operating on you who just rotated into that segment of the workforce a year or two ago? How's it going to work? Would there even be a medical segment to the workforce? I can see the rotation and workforce system possibly working for many of the lower level tasks and positions, but as soon as you start bringing in these higher level professions that require extensive formal training, not to mention years of experience, then it seems to me that the whole rotation system breaks down, and frankly, the entire workforce idea seems to be called into question as well. That made everyone's eyebrows go up. This clearly wasn't going to be as simple as we thought, and in fact, this turned out to be one of the most difficult problems for us to tackle. Sarah Crandall said, I guess we were all kind of assuming that these things would somehow be part of the workforce segments, since we kept all those job types in our spreadsheet as workforce positions. But Jordan is right. Doctors, dentists, surgeons, etc. need a great deal of specialized training. Jordan continued, if you make these professions part of the workforce, then will the people in them be excused from the normal rotations? If I'm a doctor, will I get to be just a doctor and not have to work my fair share of what everyone else has to work in the rotation system. So being a doctor then gives me special privileges, at least as far as the workforce is concerned. The hours I put in practicing medicine would then count as time in the workforce? Frankly, I don't see how you could do it any other way. The same would then hold true for engineers, scientists, lawyers, psychologists, etc. In fact, anything that could be put into the category of needing some sort of higher level specialized training. And as soon as you do that, then you create a division of labor, those that participate in the workforce and those that are, in a sense, above that, reaping the benefits of the work done by those participating. Then Patty said, "You're making this sound like a problem, Jordan. So what? So what if those who are more specially trained put in their workforce hours in a different way? They're still putting in hours. Society is still benefiting from their services. What's the big deal?" "Yeah," said Mike. "It's not like you're creating some sort of huge class rift or something." "Maybe not," replied Jordan. "But then again, it may be perceived that way. And once it's perceived that way, then for all intents and purposes, it functions that way. For example, parents would be raising their kids to enter the more esteemed professions, so they would be exempt from the common workforce, the lower class, if you will. Then an imbalance would be created. You'd have an overabundance of people in the upper class, mostly sitting around because there isn't enough demand for their services to keep them all busy. Meanwhile, there is plenty of work in the workforce that now is depending on fewer and fewer workers because everyone's electing to pursue the upper class professions, exempting them from the normal workforce duties. So now the common workers, or workforce workers, have to work more hours because there are fewer of them. It just seems to me that it sort of goes against the grain of this utopia you're building, where everyone is on an equal footing, each putting in their fair share equally, and then equally sharing in the benefits. Everyone would no longer be equally shouldering the responsibilities. "But," interjected Scott, "if it were set up the alternate way, where those in the higher professions were not exempt, but rather the time they spent actually working in that higher profession counted as workforce hours, then those who logged very little hours would still have to augment it with time in the workforce to satisfy their workforce requirement. Then it would balance out." "Perhaps," tentatively agreed Jordan. "But now you run into the problem of who gets the work in the higher professions. How is it awarded? Is it rotated? But then as a patient, we'd be saying that I have to get whatever doctor is being awarded the work at that time. No choice. I can see problems with this method as well. It promotes a situation where everyone in those professions is fighting for that work, backstabbing each other so they end up with more, or possibly creating some sort of fraudulent schemes to claim they have worked more hours than they actually did. I don't see a whole lot of friendly mutual collaboration or a cooperative sharing of ideas under those circumstances. I see fierce competition. As soon as there's some sort of perceived advantage, people compete for that advantage." Jordan's manner was confident. You could tell that he felt he'd found the angle that was irrefutable, one that was going to destroy any hopes that this system could possibly work. Undeniable human nature would deal the final fatal blow to cooperatism, and there would be no recovery. Then John said, "I have actually thought about this since our last class. It was not in any sort of depth like what we're talking about now, but it did occur to me that something might have to be resolved with regard to the higher professions. I didn't quite know what the problem was, but Jordan, I think you've expressed it quite well, and I do agree with you that it does go against the basic premise and philosophy of cooperatism. My uncle happens to be a doctor," he continued, "and I was talking to him about it the other day. And based on the discussion we had, a few things have occurred to me. I haven't come up with any sort of master plan for it all to work or anything, but I do have some thoughts. For how many people is medicine a passion? How many doctors love being doctors? How many would do it even if there were very little financial reward? How many, even now in our current money system, forgo the normal financial rewards for that profession and choose to practice in third world countries for years on end? How many really devoted doctors are there out there? How many? If they were in a society where all their day-to-day living needs were taken care of, like in cooperatism, would they still feel compelled to devote most of or all of their free time and most of their lives to that art or science, if you prefer? How many would do this? For how many is the practice of medicine more than a profession? For how many is it a passion? There are many who feel this way, although probably not nearly as many as can be counted working in the profession today, but still, they are out there. Some of us will do our stint in the workforce, devoting the rest of our time to becoming the greatest tennis player or writer or chef. Some will go on to become experts in other disciplines like mathematics or one of the sciences or engineering or psychology or astronomy. Humankind is so diverse. That's why all of these various disciplines exist and survive, because some segment of the population finds them fascinating. And it just so happens that this is also good for the rest of us. We all benefit from their expertise, and they love to show off, if you will. They love circumstances where they can put to use their knowledge and skills. We all love to do this, whatever our expertise is. It's one of the pleasures in life. So because of this, I do think these disciplines and arts will flourish, and they will flourish in greater ways than they do now. In my opinion, the money system and bureaucracy and red tape actually hinder the flourishing of these disciplines. He paused momentarily and then continued. I ask you this. When you have a medical problem, would you want a doctor who may be bright and has a mild interest in the field along with some talent, but who chose to become a doctor based mainly on the financial position he or she thought it would give him or her in life? This person might really have a passion and desire to pursue some other career, but they didn't, because they didn't foresee it allowing them the financial freedom that they were hoping for by becoming a doctor. Or in contrast, would you hope to end up with a doctor whose passion is medicine? Someone who didn't choose the profession for its financial advantages, someone who felt compelled to choose it even if it came with no financial or other advantages at all. A doctor who lives and breathes medicine and whose ultimate joy in life is to have the opportunity to practice this discipline on people who seek his or her help. I think those are the doctors we want, and I think there will be enough of them around to help those in need, and I think they will form groups and collaborate with one another, sharing ideas and techniques, and I don't think they will require some sort of payment or advantage fit for their degree of expertise if someone comes to them with a medical problem. They will welcome patients. Patients will be opportunities for these committed doctors to practice their art, and these doctors will no longer be burdened by costs and payments and outrageous insurances. They will always do their best, and they will be trusted to do their best. There will be a trust nurtured between doctors and patients and an open communication. Money won't be a factor anymore. Patients won't be paying for services, and doctors won't be paying for mistakes. Mistakes will be made, just as they are now, and they will have to live with those mistakes. And those that come to them for help will know that mistakes can be made, but they will know that these doctors will give their absolute best to every patient because they want to, because they enjoy it, because that is what they do. And patients will accept that fact and trust these doctors, knowing that these doctors are passionate and have a desire to figure out what the problem is and cure it. Doctors who freely collaborate with their peers to compare procedures, get advice, and discuss various options. Doctors who love learning all they can and who want to share it, not for money, but because it's a passion. These doctors will form medical organizations or institutions, and these institutions will be places where anyone can go freely to discuss and or get help with a medical problem. They will also be places where anyone can go to begin an apprenticeship, to learn, be trained, and gain first-hand experience in these sciences and arts. And this will be a choice, not a workforce function. This will be something someone does because they choose to, because they have a passion for it. It will be volunteer, if you will. And if you think this is being naive, just think of how many people now in our money-driven society volunteer as firefighters, ambulance corps personnel, in hospitals for hospice, etc., in addition to their regular jobs. I firmly believe there will be no shortage of brilliantly qualified doctors, surgeons, dentists, and all manner of medical personnel. And I also believe, after thinking about it, that in a cooperatist society, the demand for medical services would drastically decrease. We won't need as many doctors. It won't be the huge bureaucracy like it is now. I think the medical profession will back me up when I say a huge percent of illness is directly or indirectly related to how we live, the stresses of, the nutritional sidestepping conveniences of the system we participate in. Our financial worries, our job worries, our career worries, our processed food, our fast food habits, and our pollution all contribute to a plethora of medical maladies we see in society today. Living in a modern money system, I believe, is undoubtedly far more detrimental to good health for a majority of the people and for a variety of reasons than living in a system such as cooperatism. And therefore, I think the medical profession will safely and preferably downsize. Mark then excitedly added, "The quality of our food will change. It won't be grown by huge corporate conglomerates only interested in more profit, figuring out ways to do things cheaper and faster. It will be grown by common people, cooperating and caring about quality because they themselves and their families and friends will be eating what they have a hand in producing. They won't be bound by the policies of an employer because they need a paycheck. Time and money will cease to be a factor. Quality, true quality will matter." Kate then interjected and said, "Probably a lot less processed food." Ray observed, "It seems reasonable that, as John implies, pollution will also decrease. We haven't discussed this really, but most pollution exists as a direct result of the consequences of a money-based system. Think about it. Pollution is more cost-effective. It is worth it for a company to pollute a little in order to increase profits. In a money system, that is a fair trade-off. That is a viable option. It is obviously true because we have all witnessed that that is exactly what occurs. However," he continued, "in a cooperative system, there is no reason for this to occur. There need be no compromise based on profit and therefore on some cost-effective formula. As a society, we won't have to be caught in the dilemma of polluting or paying more." Then John continued, "So the medical profession won't be this huge, unwieldy corporate bureaucracy that we are used to in this day and age, but will be simpler, a more personal and effective organization that will function more on purpose. This should also be true of the other professions mentioned. There will be organizations and institutions for the engineering disciplines and the mathematicians and the astronomers and the psychologists, etc. And these organizations will be called upon by the public and the workforce to share their knowledge and skills, and they will do it because they want to. These things won't need to be part of the workforce. They will be volunteer." Jordan naturally questioned this. "So," he said, "you're saying that doctors will practice medicine in addition to participating in the workforce. Pursuing medicine will be comparable to pursuing kite flying or tennis." To which John replied, As ridiculous as this may seem to sound initially, the answer is yes. But if you think about it, it's not that preposterous. All of the higher level professions we have kept in the workforce numbers from Milt's research because we weren't sure if they were going to be included or not, right? So if we don't include them in those figures, that should decrease our workforce population figure by a significant amount. We've still included many categories that I think we will ultimately decrease, if not altogether eliminate, reducing that percentage even further, bringing it somewhere below 20%. This is very significant because that means that if 30% of the population is between 25 and 45, and it only takes 20% of the population to participate in the workforce, he then pulled out a calculator and began pushing buttons. If everyone participates in the workforce between the ages of 25 and 45, an average work week will consist of 27 hours per week. That might be 3 9-hour days, or 4 7-hour days, or 5 5.5-hour days. He paused for a moment, and Roger inserted a thought. There seems to be so many possibilities the way the work hours and days could be structured in this system. It could easily be such that you work a week and then have a week off, or a month, or 6 months, or even a year and have the equivalent time off. It all depends on how many people are in the workforce and how many hours need to be worked and how we want to divvy them up. John continued, so even when someone is participating in the workforce, a great deal of their time would be free. If they know what their passion is at an early age and pursue it actively in their teenage or early 20s, by the time they enter the workforce, they may already be quite proficient. Then during their workforce years, they will still have plenty of time to devote to it. They will become experienced, seasoned, experts and specialists, and most likely will continue even after fulfilling their workforce obligations. But their workforce years need not be wasted at all in terms of their specialty. They could still effectively pursue it and do their part in the workforce. Roger then brought up another point. And a huge advantage to this system is there will be no financial penalties for taking a break for a while. In a money system, it's not that easy just to quit for a number of years or even forever without suffering some sort of financial penalty or retirement penalty. In cooperativism, this option is always there. Would you want to be operated on by a doctor who feels burnt out in his profession but keeps plugging along, going through the motions simply so he can maintain his financial advantages while waiting to retire? It depends on how good he was, quipped Jordan, and then introduced a new concern. He said, but what about all the different specialties in the medical profession? Like heart doctors versus eye doctors versus radiologists versus pathologists, etc. It sounds like all of these doctors in your description will be a group of family practitioners, not particularly specializing in any one thing. Jack of all trades, experts in none. Don't we need the specialization? What about all of the many subgroups, branches, and aides that support and enhance the work of the doctors, such as nurses, physical therapists, and lab technicians? Do you think there will be a wealth of volunteers for all of these positions as well? There's also a tremendous need for all of these in support of all the doctors, don't you think? John responded with, you, I'm thinking, along with most people, innately assume and believe that the money system is what regulates and balances all of this diversity. And without a money system, certain functions won't get fulfilled. You, I'm guessing, feel that job markets and opportunities in the money system sway people to train for and accept certain career positions that would otherwise be vacant if it weren't for the fact that those people want and need a job, right? Jordan shrugged. Yeah. John continued. In other words, everyone who has a passion for the medical profession wants to be a doctor, right? Those who become nurses or lab technicians are people who didn't have the smarts, discipline, or skills to become a doctor, so they're settling for second best or third best with the incentive that they are still able to earn a decent living and are still somehow participating in a broad sense, the field of their choice. And the money system, the great job market equalizer, is what populates all of these lesser professions, right? Jordan shrugged again. So what's your point? He said. Well, said John, shrugging himself, I don't agree. I think innate human diversity will take care of that balance. The fact that no two human beings are exactly alike, the fact that no two human beings have exactly the same inner drive or exactly the same ambitions is what will balance these things. That is not to say that the money system does not affect this balance in an economic sense, but it is only in an economic sense that this is useful. If you eliminate the need to sustain some sort of economy, then man's own diversity will fill the appropriate categories. It won't always be in some sort of perfect balance, if there even is such a thing, but then the money system doesn't achieve this either. There are always fluctuations that come and go over time. He summarized. The bottom line is, I don't think it takes a money system to force this diversity to occur and fill in all of the vacant gaps. I think people are diverse enough that there will be those whose enjoyment comes from filling these various gaps and subgroupings. And if there is a shortage somewhere, those who need these tasks to be done will fill in the gaps themselves. Maybe doctors will perform their own x-rays and MRIs. Maybe doctors will help out other doctors, sharing responsibilities, utilizing each one's strengths and interests, complementing each other. Maybe dentists will assist other dentists with procedures instead of having precise, strict demarcations between dentists and dental assistants. I don't see that as a bad thing. In fact, it may turn out to be more effective. In cooperatism, we won't need the separation of jobs so much as we do in a money system. In a money system, we need those separations because it creates more jobs, and we need more jobs so everyone has a way to earn a living. A healthy economy depends on it, but this becomes unnecessary in a non-money-based system. So the overall structure of these professions will be allowed to evolve differently, finding their own balances without the need for economic pressures to force a particular outcome. I know this is all debatable, Jordan, he admitted. I have no way of proving this is how it will all be, nor can you prove that it won't. We can only make our case for what we think may happen. What we do know, and what is obvious, is the many problems we are definitely experiencing within a money-based system. We see daily examples of things and their policies that would be wonderfully beneficial to society or humanity in general, and that are, time and time again, thwarted and roadblocked because of inadequate funding, not to mention the crime and corruption that is an inevitable byproduct of any financial system. A non-money-based system, such as cooperatism, clearly eliminates all or most of these problems without seemingly creating new ones. And even if new ones are created, at this point, it seems to me that humanity as a whole might be far better off with the new ones. The uncertainty about cooperatism is that it seems to be counting on the assumption that humanity will be able to get along and cooperate with each other so that the system can work. Jordan, I know you, for one, are doubtful about this, and I must admit, although I very much like the idea of this philosophy, I also question the ultimate fairness of mankind. And then, due to being out of time, Strickland ended the class there, summarizing, okay, good work today. It's time to wrap it up. We began by deciding that a loose rotation system could work for probably most of, if not all of, the more or less unskilled or semi-skilled tasks needed in the workforce. There would be a seniority system in place, giving workers progressively more choice as they went through their workforce years. In terms of time, everyone would have to participate equally, but there may be quite a bit of variation with regard to what tasks and segments an individual may be assigned to. and this would be based on preference and need. Jordan raised a question as to how the higher professions, those that require a great deal of higher education, would fit into this new system. John made a good case for them to be considered voluntary and therefore not be included within the jurisdiction of the workforce at all, and then concluded with a concern about how much faith can be put in humanity's ability to work together and get along. So now, what about schooling for young people? Will the school system remain like it is or need to change somehow based on these new workforce concepts? Think about that for next class.